we are being sold a massive illusion about the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And it is time we pull back the curtain. If you tune into mainstream sports networks or read the headline financial press, you are likely hearing the exact same tired, repetitive narrative. The story goes that the United States, with its colossal, multi-billion-dollar stadiums and bottomless marketing budgets, is about to swallow the lion's share of the greatest sporting event on the planet. They are hosting roughly 3/4 of the matches across 11 gleaming host cities. By all traditional metrics and initial projections, they were supposed to rake in 80% of the global fan spending. It was supposed to be an undisputed American economic triumph. But while everyone is looking south of the border, staring at the flashing lights of American megacities, a silent, monumental shift in global capital and tourism is unfolding right under our noses. There is a staggering truth being hidden behind the flashy American promotional campaign. A reality that international tourists have already figured out, even if the domestic pundits have not. Canada, despite hosting a mere fraction of the games, is quietly and systematically hijacking the economic boom of the 2026 World Cup. And the United States is watching its promised financial windfall slip right through its fingers. Let us look at the raw numbers, because they paint a picture that defies all initial expectations and, frankly, should make every Canadian sit up and pay attention. A comprehensive, deeply researched study conducted by Deloitte for FIFA projects that the 2026 World Cup will inject a phenomenal 3.8 billion Canadian dollars in economic value directly into our country. We are not just talking about temporary, fleeting spikes in restaurant bills or a few extra souvenir t-shirts sold downtown. We are talking about $2 billion added directly to our gross domestic product. We are looking at $1.3 billion in real labor income and a desperately needed $700 million in government tax revenue. But what do those billions actually mean for the average Canadian walking the streets of Toronto or Vancouver? How does this alter the reality of our daily lives? It translates to the creation and support of over 24,000 jobs between 2023 and 2026. For a nation currently grappling with stubborn inflation, a brutal housing affordability crisis, and terrifying wage stagnation, this is not just a sports tournament. This is a massive, multi-billion-dollar economic stimulus package arriving at the exact moment our local economies are gasping for air. It means real paychecks for hospitality workers who have struggled since the pandemic, booming revenue for local contractors hired to build out fan zones, and a critical lifeline for small business owners who have been battered by rising interest rates and crushing commercial lease costs. The infusion of $700 million in government revenue is not just abstract math. That is capital that can absolutely have slash Mackey and absolutely must be directed into our public services. That is money that can help fund our strained healthcare systems, repair aging municipal infrastructure, and perhaps provide localized tax reliefs or subsidize affordable housing initiatives in our major urban centers. But that's not the most surprising part. The truly fascinating element of this story is not just how much Canada is gaining, but exactly how and why the United States is catastrophically losing its grip on the international tourist dollar. You see, the American hotel and hospitality industry is currently waking up in a cold sweat to a chilling reality. When you host the vast majority of a global tournament, you expect a tidal wave of international bookings years in advance. Yet, credible reports are surfacing that a staggering 80% of hotels in American host cities are seeing advance bookings that fall drastically below their forecast. Room rates, which were expected to skyrocket to premium levels, are actually dropping. In some American cities, the projected prices are currently hovering lower than a normal run-of-the-mill summer tourist season. The American Hotel and Lodging Association has even gone so far as to practically label the anticipated World Cup rush in the US a non-event. A non-event Let that sink in for a moment. Ask yourself this: how does the biggest, most culturally significant tournament on Earth become a non-event in the world's largest, most aggressive capitalist economy? What happened next was even more revealing. International fans from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East sat down at their kitchen tables, looked at the logistics of traveling to the United States, and simply said no. The reasons behind this mass defection are a perfect storm of political friction and economic barrier. First and foremost, we have the notorious American visa process. It is completely riddled with massive bureaucratic backlogs, exorbitant non-refundable fees, and alarmingly high rejection rates. Why would a family from Senegal or a group of passionate fans from Germany risk thousands of dollars and months of planning just to be tied up in red tape or face the intimidating, often hostile glare of border control and immigration and customs enforcement? Then there is the undeniable, heavy issue of the American political climate. The lingering shadows of previous administrations, specifically the rhetoric from the Trump era, combined with the current highly polarized atmosphere, have left countless international travelers deeply anxious about facing discrimination, racial profiling, or arbitrary entry denials. When you combine this intense political apprehension with what many global citizens are rightfully calling blatant price gouging, astronomical costs for basic stadium tickets, inflated hotel rooms, mediocre food, and shockingly expensive domestic transit, the American dream vacation quickly morphs into a logistical and financial nightmare. We are even seeing unprecedented reports of unsold tickets for the opening matches on American soil, a scenario that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn, as global fans firmly turn their backs on the friction, the expense, and the anxiety of American travel. They looked immediately north. They looked at Canada. Suddenly, our long-standing position as the friendly, accessible, and polite neighbor transformed from a cultural stereotype into a multi-billion-dollar competitive advantage. Canada is rapidly being globally recognized as the far superior alternative. We offer a visa process that, while certainly not perfect, is perceived internationally as much more streamlined, predictable, and welcoming than the American equivalent. We offer an exchange rate that gives international travelers from Europe and Asia significantly more bang for their buck, turning what would be a budget-breaking trip in New York or Los Angeles into a highly manageable, luxurious experience in Canada. And perhaps most importantly, we offer a profound sense of security. There is no looming, pervasive fear of aggressive immigration enforcement. There is a deeply ingrained, highly respected global perception of Canadian multiculturalism, tolerance, and safety. The direct result of this is that hotels in our host cities of Toronto and Vancouver are currently experiencing occupancy projections and advanced bookings that are absolutely obliterating American numbers. The international money that was supposed to flood into the cash registers of cities like Atlanta, Dallas, and Miami is instead pouring directly into the Canadian economy. Let us zoom in on what this actually looks like on the ground in a city like Vancouver. British Columbia is set to host 7 matches. 7 in the grand, sprawling scheme of a massive, expanded 48-team World Cup. That might sound like a mere drop in the bucket, but because Vancouver has brilliantly positioned itself as the safe, incredibly beautiful, and affordable gateway for international fans, those 7 matches are generating an outsized, massive economic shockwave. Fans are not just flying in for a 90-minute soccer game and rushing back to the airport. They're making Canada their permanent base camp for the duration of the tournament. They are booking out our hotels for weeks at a time. pouring foreign capital into our world-class local restaurants, utilizing our public transit networks, and spending their money in our local retail shops. Toronto is experiencing the exact same incredible phenomenon. Our cities are reaping the massive rewards of high density, high spending international tourism without having to shoulder the absurd, crippling infrastructural debt that many American cities took on just to upgrade their stadiums to FIFA's draconian and luxurious standards. The numbers become even more concerning when you look closer at the fundamental concept of co-hosting a mega event. Historically, when nations agree to co-host, the dominant, larger partner dictates the terms, controls the narrative, and inevitably reaps the vast majority of the rewards. The United States naturally assumed that role. They believed, rather arrogantly, that by taking the lion's share of the matches, they would automatically inherit the lion's share of the economic prosperity. But they fundamentally misunderstood the psychology of the modern global tourist. Today's traveler is highly informed, constantly connected, and completely intolerant of being extorted or made to feel unwelcome. When American cities banked on the World Cup to revitalize their struggling post-pandemic domestic tourism sectors, they assumed international fans would tolerate absolutely any price and endure any inconvenience just for the privilege of being there. They were dead wrong, and Canada is now cashing the checks that the United States thought were already safely in the bank. We are witnessing an absolute masterclass in soft power. Soft power is the ability to attract and co-opt rather than coerce. By simply being who we are, a relatively stable, welcoming, and cost-effective nation, we are dramatically elevating our national brand on the global stage. We are buying international goodwill, prestige, and immense economic stimulation at a fraction of the financial and social cost our southern neighbors are paying. We must also look at the other major player in this continental co-hosting trio, because it highlights exactly how isolated the American strategy has become. Mexico is experiencing a similar, albeit culturally distinct, massive tourism boom. International fans, particularly those from Latin America and Europe, are flocking to Mexico for its rich, passionate cultural proximity to the sport, its incredible affordability, and its vibrant, welcoming atmosphere. The United States is effectively being squeezed out from both sides of its own borders. They are bleeding the luxury, high-spending European and Asian tourists to Canada, and they are simultaneously losing the passionate, volume-driven global fans to Mexico. The American host cities that spent hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars militarizing their security apparatuses, expanding their VIP suites, and building exclusive zones are now staring down the barrel of a return on investment that will fall woefully, embarrassingly short of their grand political promises. They built an exclusive, highly fortified fortress, and the rest of the world simply decided to have the party next door. This entire situation exposes a massive, glaring flaw in how governments historically calculate the value of mega events. The old, tired model was simple: build massive stadiums, promise the public the moon, host the most games, and wait for the money to miraculously roll in. But the 2026 World Cup is proving unequivocally that the new economic model is entirely about accessibility, perception, and value. Canada has, perhaps inadvertently, stumbled into the absolute perfect economic strategy. We took on severely limited risk. We committed to a small, manageable number of games in cities that already possessed the necessary world-class infrastructure. We did not bankrupt our municipalities or sell out our taxpayers to appease the lavish, outrageous demands of international sporting bodies. Instead, we let the United States take on the massive financial burden, the incredible logistical stress, and the inevitable public relations nightmares, while we quietly and smartly positioned ourselves as the premium, hassle-free alternative. We are the ultimate free riders in the best, most lucrative economic sense possible. Think about the long-term, generational legacy this leaves for Canada. When tens of thousands of international visitors return to their home countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa, what stories will they tell their peers? They will not be telling horror stories about 2-hour sweat-inducing interrogations at the American border. They will not be complaining about paying $100 for a basic, tasteless meal in a sterile American stadium parking lot. They will go back and talk about the breathtaking, majestic backdrop of the North Shore Mountains in Vancouver. They will talk about the vibrant, diverse, and incredibly walkable streets of downtown Toronto. They will tell their friends, their families, and their business associates that Canada is a premier, welcoming global destination. This authentic word-of-mouth marketing is worth billions in future tourism and business revenue. It is an advertising campaign that money simply cannot buy. We are cementing our reputation as a top-tier, reliable destination for international events, major conferences, and global tourism for the next decade. This dynamic should serve as a massive, unavoidable wake-up call for our own political and economic leaders across the country. For decades, Canada has suffered from a slight but persistent inferiority complex when compared to the massive economic and cultural juggernaut to our south. We are so often defined by what we are not, rather than what we powerfully are. We are stereotyped as the quiet, unassuming upstairs neighbor. But in this specific, highly lucrative instance, the dynamic has completely flipped on its head. We are not just the polite alternative, we are the objectively smart economic choice. We are outmaneuvering the biggest economy on earth simply by remaining open, reasonable, and welcoming. When we prioritize sensible, efficient immigration and visitor policies, when we fiercely maintain our global reputation for safety and true inclusivity, and when we ensure our economy remains competitive, we do not just win fleeting moral victories. We win actual, measurable, multi-billion-dollar economic victories that put food on the tables of Canadian families. As we inch closer to the opening kickoff of the 2026 World Cup, the overarching narrative is crystal clear. The scoreboard is already lighting up. The numbers are heavily skewed, and the actual game has not even begun. Canada is pulling off one of the greatest, quietest economic upsets in modern sports history. We are taking a mere fraction of the responsibility, hosting barely a handful of games, and walking away with a massive, entirely disproportionate share of the financial reward. We are proving to the world that in the modern global economy, being the biggest, the loudest, and the most expensive no longer guarantees success. Sometimes, the most incredibly lucrative strategy is to simply offer a safe, welcoming harbor in a swirling storm of overpricing and political anxiety. The $3.8 billion heading our way is vastly more than just a temporary bump in tourism revenue. It is a permanent testament to the enduring, incredible value of the Canadian brand. So, while the United States furiously scrambles to figure out exactly why their billion-dollar, state-of-the-art stadiums are surrounded by half-empty hotels and disappointed local businesses, everyday Canadians can sit back, enjoy the beautiful game, and watch the international investments roll into our communities. We didn't just level the playing field, we fundamentally changed the rules of the game. And the future of the Canadian economy will be quietly reaping these massive benefits long after the final whistle is blown.